Buying or selling a house can already be a very stressful process, but it's even more stressful if you have no idea what the general process looks like. So in today's video, I'm going to cover what I call the real estate sales life cycle. Basically, this is what happens from a house between the time that a seller or an owner decides to sell their house all the way through to the closing table where the property actually changes hands and money is sent. In general, there are 4 different phases of the real estate life cycle. Those are the pre-market phase, the active listing phase, the under contract phase, and then the close phase. And each of these phases has a couple different milestones and different things that need to happen in order for the transaction to go through smoothly and to get everyone from the sale all the way to the closing table. Now, each one of these parts of the sales life cycle is going to take a different amount of time. There's going to be different things involved. And this video is just meant to be a general grand overview of that process. If you're interested in seeing more about the individual processes and what goes into each individual section, you can check out my other videos on the channel where I deep dive into each one of these sections. Now, the first part of the sales lifecycle is what we call the pre-market or the pre-listing phase. And this basically encompasses any time before the house is actually listed on the market. The length of time that a house is not on the market or in the pre-listing phase is wildly dependent on the seller's situation, the buyer's situation, what's going on in their life, how soon they want to move. There's just almost too many factors to consider here. But in general, in my experience, once a homeowner decides to list their property, it usually takes about 7 to 10 days to get the house ready to go and on the market. Now, there are a couple important things to take note of when you're in the pre-listing phase. And those are basically all the things that you need to do to tee yourself up to have a great first listing day. So things that you want to do in the pre-market phase are get the house nice and clean, whether that's doing it yourself or hiring a cleaning crew, totally up to you, but you absolutely have to have a clean house. Then you want to get the house staged if that's in your wheelhouse. If it's not, also fine. But typically what I see is that staged homes do perform better and have a tendency to have shorter days on the market. The next step you want to do is go ahead and grab professional photos. And again, I will stress this as much as I can. You should always, always, always get professional photos. The days of snapping a couple of photos with your iPhone are long gone. And if you really want to edge out the competition, you need to have a professional photographer. Sometimes your photographer will even throw in something like drone footage or a video walkthrough. All these things are going to help to enhance your listing and make it stand out to other people. The last 2 things that are going to happen in the pre-listing phase are marketing prep, which is where your real estate agent or whoever's listing your house is going to take the time to generate a whole marketing package. So this could be old school paper flyers, or it could be digital marketing via Facebook ads, Meta ads, Instagram, whatever it may be. But your real estate agent and your listing agent should definitely have some kind of marketing plan so that you know that your property is going to get the maximum exposure. And your agent should be taking the time before you list in order to get all this stuff together so that once listing day hits, your property is going to be in front of as many eyes as possible. Now, once we have the photos, the house cleaned, staging done, videos, and all the marketing prep ready to go, the last thing you need to do is actually create the listing in the MLS. Again, this is going to be something that your agent does for you, but in general, it's going to be hard to list and market a property if it's not on the internet. So all in all, we have 5 major things that need to happen in the pre-marketing phase, and each of those things usually takes about 1 to 3 days each. A deep clean, usually the first thing you want to do, is going to take about a day. Staging is going to take 1 to 2 days. Photos usually only take 1 day to complete, but it'll take some processing time. So you're looking at maybe 2 to 3 days for the photos. The marketing prep could be one of the things that takes a little bit longer, but typically I can see a good agent knocking this out in about 1 to 3 days. And then creating the listing itself, selecting the photos, uploading all the appropriate data, that's going to probably take about a full day for your listing agent to do as well. So all in all, you're looking at somewhere between 5 to 10 days from the time that you decide to pull the trigger to list your house all the way until the house is actually ready to be on the market. Now that we've covered all the things that need to be done before the house hits the market in the pre-listing phase, let's talk about what's going to happen in the active phase where the house is actually on the market. Now, depending on what platform you're using to look at properties, if it's the MLS, any property that is on the market that is not under contract is going to be listed as active. Now, the house can be in this active phase for anywhere from 3 days to upwards of 6 months. It really is hyper dependent on where in the city you are, what township you're in, the price of the house, the condition of the house. There's a lot that goes into how long your house is going to be on the market. In my experience, there are three major things that are going to make a house move quickly from being listed to going under contract. And those three things are the location, the price, and the condition of the property. So when you're looking at these three items, location, price, and condition, the first thing you want to start with is location. One neighborhood is going to have a house for sale that's $400,000, and that house is going to be a total dump, whereas the same $400,000 house in a different neighborhood all the way across town could be the nicest home on the block. So that's really the first thing we want to look at is location. The second thing that's going to help move the house quickly is the pricing. There's a lot that goes into pricing a house. So I'm actually going to create another video to talk about exactly how to comp your house like a pro real estate agent. So be sure to check that one out in the coming weeks. The third thing is the condition of the house. If the location is good and the pricing is good, but the condition isn't great, meaning there are other houses that are in the same location, same price, but have nicer finishes or are more stylish, have a better curb appeal, all those things are going to contribute to making the other house sell a lot faster than the one you have listed. So really the big takeaway for the active phase is the best way to get your house on and off the market as quickly as possible is to comp out your house properly, because you can't really do a whole lot about the location, right? So you want to make sure that for the location that you're in, the pricing needs to be appropriate for the condition of the house. The next part of the real estate sales life cycle after the pre-listing and the active phase is what we call under contract. Now, there's a couple different terms for when a house goes under contract, and it typically relates to why the house went under contract and why the house is not yet sold. In Charleston, our local MLS, we have a difference between pending properties and active contingent properties. A pending property is just something that's waiting on a timeline to run out, that's not really waiting on a contract contingency for the house to close. On the other hand, a property that's listed on the MLS that is marked as active contingent means that there are certain contingencies in the contract, or you can think of a contingency like an escape clause, and those escape clauses have not yet been satisfied. For example, if you have an inspection contingency where a prospective buyer has 10 days to inspect the house, then the property would be active contingent with a contingency reason of inspection. Now, in this process, there's a couple major things that need to happen, and there are several major contingencies that you'll see in a standard real estate transaction. The biggest hurdle is typically the financing contingency, and this is just the thing that takes the longest. The other contingencies that I see in Charleston are due diligence, which is just an opportunity for the new buyer to get as much information as possible about the property. Financing, like I already said, CL 100, which is a pest, termite, and wood rot inspection. A home sale contingency, which could complicate things depending on how well the house sells before this current transaction you're in. The repairs that are necessary, which again, this kind of falls into the due diligence or the inspection part of the contingencies. And then lastly, the title prep and all of the documentation that needs to happen on the title side of things to make sure that the property can actually transfer from one owner to the other legally and without any issues. So during this phase of the real estate sales cycle, there's a lot going on, right? So the under contract phase is one of the most complicated and most difficult things to get through because there's just a ton of moving pieces. You have the underwriter, you have the lender who's trying to get the new buyer through underwriting, you have home inspections that need to get done, you have termite inspections that need to get done. The title company needs to make sure that the home is actually warrantable, meaning you can actually transfer the home legally. And then on top of all that, a lot of these things are interlocked and they have timelines that need to be met. For example, a pest inspection or a CL 100 has to be done within 30 days of the closing date. So if you get a CL 100, usually it's not very expensive, only about 75, 80 bucks. But if you get one of those too early, then you'll have to get the house re-inspected with another CL 100 and incur an additional cost that's closer to the closing date. Now that we've made it all the way from pre-listing, active property, active contingent or pending, which means under contract, the last phase of the real estate life cycle is the closed phase. This is everybody's favorite phase because everybody gets paid, the buyer gets their new house, the seller gets the fat wallet, and it all works out for everyone, hopefully. But there are definitely a couple things that you need to keep in mind as you approach the closing part of the real estate sales life cycle. Once you get to the closing table, you're going to have a myriad of different documents to sign. And depending on which side of the transaction you're on, whether that's the buyer side or the seller side, you're going to have significantly more things to sign than if you're on one side or the other. For example, the buyer side is going to have not only documents that signify that they have transferred ownership of the property, but they're also going to have to fill out all of the mortgage documents, right? This could be upwards of a couple hundred pages, depending on how well prepared the mortgage documents and the title documents are. On the seller side, usually that's just a couple of signatures on a HUD, which is the closing statement, and then you're pretty much done there. The other big thing that happens on closing day is that the lender has to actually fund the transaction. This means that the lender sends their $2, $3, $4, $500,000, however much it is. They send it to the closing attorney or to the title company, depending on what kind of state you're in order for the house to be purchased. Now, until the lender sends those funds, you're still kind of out in limbo. So even if everybody has signed all the documents, all the mortgage documents have been signed, the deed has been signed, all the title transfer stuff has been done, but the lender hasn't funded the transaction yet, you're not closed yet. And really, after all those documents are signed and the lender has finally funded the transaction, there's one last thing that has to happen, and that is the recording. So what the attorney is going to do is they're going to take all those documents, right? The mortgage, the deed, the title chain, they're going to take all that to the county and they're going to make sure that it's recorded on public record. So in case you didn't know, anytime you buy or sell a house, regardless of whether it's on market or off market, there should be a chain of people you can see on the title history because all of that information is public records. So if you've made it this far from the pre-listing stage all the way to the closing stage, congratulations, you did it. You either sold your house and hopefully you have a fat wad of cash in your bank account, or you bought a house and now you get to experience the joys of homeownership. Now, if you noticed in this video, I used a couple different terms somewhat interchangeably. Sometimes I said attorney, sometimes I said title company, sometimes I said mortgage, maybe I said deed of trust. And to be honest, some of this stuff can be pretty confusing. So in order to help clear all this stuff up, I've created another video that explains the difference between all those different things depending on what state you are. If you like this video and you like this type of stuff, make sure that you follow, like, and subscribe so you can get more information and make an intelligent purchase for your first or next house.